Hey there, sweet one. Today we're going to be studying together from the SAS Survival Handbook. We're going to be starting on a series about how to take care of yourself in an emergency situation. I think that we're going to have some lovely time studying together and it'll be relaxing. So I'm a physician. I've done a very short period of operational medicine. I've trained medics in austere environments. And more importantly, I'm working on my Fellowship of Advanced Wilderness Medicine, so I am currently a FOM candidate. Anything I say in this video, medical-wise, it cannot be official medical advice because you and I have never met. But here in this secret training ground where you and I are just kind of covertly studying together, it's fine. We do what we need to do, okay? But in real life, no actual medical information. We've never met, okay? Just self-care information, okay? So as we study together, the advantage to studying with me instead of just getting the book is I have some of this extra information, not just from my personal experience, but from other resources based on what I've been educated. I've done medical trips in Paraguay. I did my medical school in Puerto Rico. Particularly, I did a period of time up in the mountains of Castañer, which was kind of more low resource setting. So I've had experience with urban medicine. I've had experience with fairly low resource settings, and I'm excited to be sharing some of that with you and studying together because I need to learn and refresh too. So, all right, let's get started. So this is one of the best survival handbooks that is out there. You'll see it sold in a lot of military installments, and it's supposed to be fairly regularly up to date, and used by the Britain's elite special air force, basically. So it's a worldwide bestseller. So I think we're gonna have some fun together studying. The first chapter is going to be essentials for survival, and it might be good for you to get this if you're serious about studying together. It might be good for you to actually get the book and then we can talk about it and kind of work together. If you're not and you just kind of want to listen for relaxation, that's fine. So the first section goes through what's called planning. Planning, P stands for protection. You must ensure that you're protected from further danger, so impending avalanche, forest fire, exploding fuel, so forth. There are several reasons you should always stay at the scene. If you're in a vehicle breakdown in the middle of the desert or a plane crash, something like that. First, you can utilize the wreckage for signaling or shelter. Second, it's a bigger signature on the ground, so it's easier to find when people are flying over you. Third, there are probably injured people that cannot be moved. And fourth, by staying where you are, you conserve energy. Because you've booked in and out and have stayed on the route, rescue time will be minimal, which I think is the same as the first part. So that's P for protection. L for location. The next step after building a shelter is to put out emergency signals. You must draw attention to your position. Do this as soon as possible to help the rescuers. A, acquisition. While waiting to be rescued, look for water and food to help supplement your emergency supplies. N is for navigation. Good navigation will keep you en route and will often avert a survival situation. But if you find yourself stranded, stay where you are. Okay, and then plan at the end, they put an M, medical. You must become your own doctor, is what they say. It's a good idea to have an expedition doctor with you if you're going on a long trip, and always have a first aid kit. So this is not a medical book, but it should be useful for us, and then I can supplement. I think we're going to have a lovely time studying together. My main reason for wanting to educate other people and study this is because I want to become a superhero. As a lot of you know, I'm saving up to try to build my clinic in Paraguay in 2023. Health permitting, the goal is to have an ambulatory clinic where we can help people who need medical help. And unfortunately, that's going to take some money. So one of the big reasons I'm doing YouTube is I'm hoping to get a secondary source of income to help support that while I'm in Paraguay. It's not going as well as I'd like, but hopefully it'll pick up. And then of course I have my Patreon at patreon.com/becoming-hero. So that's what I'm working on. And basically I'd like to be able to become a superhero. And one way that you can become a superhero in your ordinary life is by preparing for bad situations so you can take care of those that are around you. Basically. Okay, so equipment checklist is kind of the next big thing, and we're going kind of quickly. They make a good little point here on page 16. Treat blisters as they occur. Don't let them become septic. Keep an eye on your companions and deal with any unusual problems as they arise. If they are limping, falling behind, or behaving strangely, stop and treat immediately. I'm going to make a point here about feet. Feet can become a huge issue if you are out somewhere. Actually, when I was in the desert at NTC in California, and we were kind of in fairly low resource conditions, feet was one of the biggest loss of work hours that we got from our soldiers, actually. And a big thing was in the cold, keeping them dry, because you can get like trench foot and things like that. I actually did see a couple incidences of trench foot, one that was quite significant. Everything resolved, everyone was okay. A lot of sprains, other kinds of ankle injuries. Basically, feet is a big way that you can lose basically manpower. This is not such a terrible problem if you have, military evacuation platforms like we did, and even in those conditions, they weren't as safe as I would have liked them to be. So, you have that, but if you're by yourself, just you and a buddy out in the woods, and you're lost, and you've been in a kind of disaster or emergency situation, you're going to have much bigger problems than, my soldiers in the desert in NTC. You can have fairly large problems if you don't have good foot care. So, wearing appropriate socks. There's debate about whether or not to layer socks in your boots. I have found, because I have very small feet, and when I'm wearing combat boots, wearing 2 layers of socks helps to keep the boots tight on me so that there's no skidding, and so that I don't get blisters as much. And I've done, 25-mile run. So that was the one special time. Otherwise, my rucks have been between 5 and 10 miles. Either way, it's a lot of rucking, walking on your feet with heavy backpacks, basically, and not a lot of issues as long as the boots are kept tight and clean. Changing your socks frequently is a huge deal. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, you get a fungal infection. It's not going to be terrible, but if you get a fungal infection and a blister, and then you get foot rot, then you're going to have problems. So we'll talk in more detail about some of these things as we continue on, as we continue studying. But that's just a little bit, kind of a little tidbit ahead of time about safety. So medical. Pay attention to your feet. Don't let your feet get wet. If your feet do get wet, dry them out before putting them back in your boots. Do everything you can to take care of your feet. Feet are a huge deal. But you don't pay attention to feet a lot because they're at the bottom, they're far away from your head. So the equipment checklist that they have in this book is, they say, before any journey or expedition, make a checklist. Ask yourself the following questions. How long will I be away? How much food do I need for this period? Do I need to carry water? Have I the right clothing for the climate and enough of it? Is one pair of boots enough? Or because of the service conditions and the amount of walking, should I take a standby pair? What special equipment do I need for the terrain? And what medical kit is appropriate? So, and of course, if you're traveling, this is a really good point that they make. They make a couple health points here. One, make sure you're fit enough for what you plan to do. The fitter you are, the easier, more enjoyable it will be. So exercising. This is why I'm trying to get back into my jiu-jitsu training. I have another session tonight. Even though I have the fibromyalgia and I'm in pain all the time, I want to be able to be fit and be ready to be able to help other people in some way. It's also good, I think it's good if you have some form of weapons training as well. Things like gun safety, knife safety, things like that. Obviously, if you have children in the home, most like American Medical Association recommendations are going to be make sure basically there's no firearms. that I think goes against a lot of survivalist culture, because a lot of survivalist culture is to be prepared for, things that could happen to you. And if you're in a survival situation, you're in a situation where something has gone terribly wrong. You're in a situation where there's economic collapse following a pandemic, and your area is having problems, and you're getting attacked by a bear. A knife isn't really going to do the trick. That said, there is a there's a special statistical word that we use for you can't ignore it, and I've forgotten it. But there's a very real problem with weapons accidents where people get harmed in the home. In fact, you're more likely to have the number of weapons accidents are higher than the number of women who are able to defend themselves from an assault. That said, I think every woman should have the right to defend herself from an assault. This all gets very philosophical. Do what you believe philosophically is the right thing to do. I'm not going to be stopping any woman from trying to, to me, even one woman defending herself is worth, and some kind of accident as well. But that's, I have a bias because I'm also a sexual assault medical forensic examiner, and so having seen some, the trauma after the fact of those, to me, self-defense is very, very important. And I think every woman should have a right to defend herself. You saw that also, and this is getting, again, I want to be careful, underprivileged groups have always been abused by the government trying to take away their right for self-defense. Hitler was, a big example. Before he seized power, he imposed very strict gun control laws to make sure that Jewish people weren't going to be able to fight back and defend themselves. In California, there was a governor who, during the time of the Black Panthers, tried to impose strict gun control on them, basically so that they couldn't defend themselves from supremacists or so forth. So, that said, people also have, again, the official medical things that I was taught in medical school, they teach us there shouldn't be guns in the house. That's what they teach us. That's actually a question on the step exam, because they teach us that it, is at risk for children, and a lot of people just don't have the safety measures. I say, do the research yourself. I'm not going to be a philosophical expert on that. Instead, I recommend you look into the FBI statistics, you look into the self-defense statistics, you look into whether or not you have the mental whereabouts, the mental health patients, especially men, are more at risk for harming themselves with a weapon. In fact, that tends to be the highest number of completed suicides is men with a firearm. So females tend to have a higher number of attempted suicides, but they tend not to succeed because they tend to use medications and don't really know how to do it. So, because there's specific medication doses that are going to cause more than just suffering. So, if you have a mental health problem or you feel that you're at risk, I always include numbers to the suicide hotline below in my description, as well as links to other helpful things. So when you're thinking about your survival situation and how to protect yourself from animals, other kinds of things like that, or from, a male attacker in the case of women. I've also had male sexual assault victims. So keep that in mind. When men are assaulted, it's usually a gang of men. It's usually a larger group of men. Women, it's usually one-on-one, and usually there's a drug or alcohol involved. So, and that I know from my training as a scifi, and I've had experience in that as well. So please think carefully about when you're choosing your survival kit. How are you going to take care of yourself? Are you going to put in the effort if you're not going to be able to put in the time and effort to be safe with a weapon? What are your other options? Home Alone is actually not completely ridiculous. There are actually special books that are written specifically for the military. You can often find them in, like if you go to the discount stores that resell military gear afterwards, the surplus stores, sometimes you can find those books about like booby traps and things like that, other ways to kind of protect your home or your family in a case of something bad happening, right? Again, I'm not a firearms expert. I qualified expert on my M4. On my M17, I did terribly. I struggled. I was having a very bad mental health day. I probably could have qualified, but I did not. So, expert on one weapon and just didn't with my pistol. So, again, I'm not an expert when it comes to weapons specifically. And I just, it's something that you need to take into account when you're putting together your survival kit. Is how are you going to take care of yourself? What are the risks and benefits of taking care of yourself? I knew somebody once who was part of a church in South Africa. 2 people came in and tried to shoot up their church, and because the pastor had a weapon, he was able to turn the attackers away, and they had less, it was quite clear that the attackers ran away once they found out there was a weapon, even though it was just a pistol and they had automatics. So there was still loss of life, but there was clearly significantly less. I also worked with a ER physician who was one of the respondents the day of the Fort Hood shooting several years ago. And, he reported from having examined and taken care of the injured in that shooting that there were 3 or 4 guys who died actually trying to charge the attacker. And so in his words, he said, "You cannot tell me if those guys had been allowed to be armed to protect themselves that they wouldn't have been able to save lives and end that conflict." Because the attacker was going to die anyway. That was his plan. And it actually circles around to some of the things that I emphasize about mental health in medical care. It was a psychiatrist who had gone crazy, essentially. Although there are people who say he always had. There's, again, the intellectual debate about what were his motivations. He had some extremist beliefs as well, so things can be complicated. So motivations, again, I'm not trying to get political. I'm trying to give you useful information for self-defense. And in this particular situation, it very strongly illustrates that there are benefits to having people being able to protect themselves. Because again, very significantly in that situation, multiple people died trying to charge this person. They would have been able to take this guy out had they been equally armed. But unfortunately, on military bases, you're actually not allowed to carry. So that's, again, getting back to the survival stuff, know what you're allowed to do, where you're allowed to be, and know what the risks are, risks and benefits of breaking the rules. I'm not advising anyone to break the law. However, sometimes I would definitely advise people to break the law under Hitler. So be careful. Be careful with what you do. Like I said in the spider video, everything in life is a risk and a benefit. And so when you're considering going into a survival situation, you need to think about what are going to be the benefits of this behavior versus the risks. Do I have control and understanding of a weapon, or am I more likely to have it turned on me and get killed? Same thing in my home. Is it safe for me to store a firearm? Are my children? What is the likelihood based on the scientific evidence of them harming themselves versus me actually ever using it to protect them? So really dig into those statistics. There are FBI statistics available. And of course, there are a lot of nonprofits with various interests because it's very highly politicized. And I think the biggest thing I can say is study history. History is the thing that lets you know what's going on. Study the history of, oppressed groups and look into how often their weapons were taken away before they were oppressed. You can't argue with history. Or study the history of a lot of these, horrible, shooting events like the one in Fort Hood. And don't just react emotionally, but think about it logically. Again, in that situation, a weapon was used to harm people, but based on the behavior of the victims in that particular situation, again, and this is based on, I know the expert, I've spoken with the expert who was there. Based on that behavior of those people, the evidence dictates they would have been able to protect themselves had they had a weapon. Right? The evidence of, their wounds and their behavior and how they moved. So, and different situations call for different things, right? The ideal world, you can talk somebody down and there's never going to be any weapon exchange. That's the ideal world. And look into how often you have copycat incidences. Look into what kinds of weapons have different risks and benefits. Do your homework. Don't just rely on a gut of the gut instinct on one side is, I should have a weapon because I should be able to do whatever I want. And the gut instinct on the other side is, weapons are dangerous and I'm afraid of them. And no one should ever have one because I don't want one to use one on me. Take your time, and I'm not going to promote a particular belief, but I'm saying for your survival situation, take your time, think about it, look at the evidence for your particular situation and for how you can defend those around you in your situation. I hope that was helpful. Let's continue. So, besides being prepared as far as, your major equipment, the major decisions you have to make, being ready, like we were talking about, regular exercise, knowing that you're able to do the exercise of the task. I have found, and I tend to be a person who I'll just break myself on the task. I don't care, and I'll go for it, and I'll come out on the other end. That is not a really safe approach. It is really better to prepare or to ramp up. Another thing is health checks. Go to your dentist before you get, which this is a great tip I've not seen in other medical survival books. Go to your dentist and have them help you out. Have them give you a check, give you some advice. And then make up a medical kit that will cover your needs, right? And make a decision about what to do in case there is a problem, right? So if a potential member of the group is not fit, should they be dropped from the party? A difficult decision among friends, but it must be made because for it is the best in the long run. Consider too the ability of each member of the group to deal with the challenge of hardship, risk, and endurance that you may meet. Stress often brings out the unknown side of a person. Very true. From page 17. So, another really good point here for travel and austere locations. Have a thorough medical check and ensure that you have all the necessary injections for the territories through which you intend to travel. There are vaccinations against yellow fever, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis, smallpox, polio, diphtheria, and tuberculosis, and an anti-tetanus injection is a must. You should be getting your tetanus every 10 years. And that's regardless of a travel situation. That's the doctors telling you, unless you, and again, I can't give you particular medical advice because I don't know if you're like the weird person who's got a genetic disorder, but 99.99999999999% of the population should be having a tetanus shot every 10 years. That is where the medical evidence is. If you want to debate about it, that's fine. Look it up on PubMed.gov. The CDC has a vaccine website. I've talked about vaccinations in one of my previous videos, actually in the Ninja Milk video, and about evidence for, evidence for vaccination, and also how to maintain, if you do believe you have a health reason to not be vaccinated, how to actually find that out scientifically instead of based on just fear and emotion. Okay. Again, these decisions have to be made, a huge, and you got to drill down to the specifics. A huge problem in a lot of the debates that we have in our society today is we talk about these global, big, ideological, broad stroke stuff rather than going little by little by little into the details of what a specific situation might require. And in medicine, that's not recommended. It's recommended to go specifics. And one of a lot of the big population health mistakes that we make are when we paint a broad brush. And it's something we do a lot in the US, kind of drill down more carefully into the nitty-gritty of the evidence. But I talked about that in my Ninja Milk video. So go check that out if you want to, kind of debate into principles of medical research and things like vaccination and stuff like that. You should get your tetanus shot. For travel, you should get these vaccinations, okay? If traveling through a malarial region, take an adequate supply of anti-malarial tablets. Allow plenty of time for jabs. The full anti-typhoid protection requires 3 injections over the course of 6 months. Okay. And you can never have too much information about a place you're going. Research is a big deal. So planning, more about planning. Ensure everyone is familiar with the equipment and that there are spares where needed, batteries, fuel, and bulbs especially. Nominate people for particular responsibilities: medic, linguist, cook, special equipment, vehicle maintenance, driver, navigator, and so forth. So entry phase, objective, and recovery are going to be your 3 phases. Clearly state the aim of each phase and work out a time scale. Plan for emergency procedures such as vehicle breakdown, illness, and casualty evacuation. So, in estimating the rate of progress, especially on foot, allow plenty of time. It is always better to underestimate and be pleasantly surprised by doing better. Here are a couple questions to go into when you're researching and you're planning. Are the people likely to be friendly and helpful of you, or are they wary of strangers? Are there local customs and taboos you should know about to avoid getting yourself into trouble? What are the local methods of shelter building, fire making, wild foods, herbal medicines, and water sources? What are your maps like? Do you have a feel for the land even before you see it? River directions, speed of flow, waterfalls, rapids, difficult currents. How high are hills and mountains? What are their slopes like? Are they snow covered? Which way do the ridges run? What kind of vegetation can you expect? What species of trees and where? What might temperatures be and how different at night and day? What are first and last light? What is the state of the moon, the time and height of the tides, prevailing wind direction and strength? What weather can be expected? This is good to know even about your own particular area where you live. I will go out sometimes on nature walks around my area, in the mindset of, if I were to not have food, where would I find it? And I look around the area, so I know where, the cactus plants are. I know where yucca grows, and I know how to harvest these things. I got myself really pricked up a little bit ago harvesting cactus fruit, and I still have spines in me, so wear gloves. Lesson learned. But bottom line, look around the area where you live. I know where the honeysuckle is in case I want to add a little something nice to what could be a dreary menu. I know, and then make the decisions about how you're going to eat in an emergency situation. So I'm kosher, so I can't eat things like rabbits, pig, shrimp, things like that. Crawdads and rabbits, rabbits especially. I haven't found any crawdad holes here in the area where I am. I'm sorry, crayfish, but there are a lot of rabbits. In an emergency situation, what is my belief on eating the rabbit versus not eating the rabbit if I need to just to survive? It's better to make the decision now, so that when the situation arises, you're not dealing with the extra mental stress of feeling like you're failing yourself. So look around your area, know what food is available, know what food you'd be willing to eat, or what you'd be willing to die for. If you're gluten-free, are you willing to die for that? That's different, right? Because that's not vegetarians in an emergency situation. Are you food vegetarian, or how do you feel about how are you going to stay alive? What are your goals? Decide now and let the people around you know might be a good idea, because that way they know whether or not they can depend on you to help them out. So knowing the food in your area, knowing what's around you, knowing some of the topography is helpful. I still don't know what would be a good place to, play the zombie apocalypse game, where people used to like to think of what's their zombie apocalypse plan. This was a plan that we all used to make as kids. I got way into it because I was very worried about, I have handicapped siblings, or we're saying differently abled now, but they've got Down syndrome and autism, so very differently abled. And I would be very concerned that they would not survive in a survival situation, and that not only that, they would, my parents might get killed trying to take care of them. That'd be very, very tough. So, thinking through how to take care of them, I had this big plan that involved a lot of, it was very dramatic. But, how are you going to take care of those people? Where are you going to hide out? In Virginia, I knew exactly where we would hide out if something bad went down. And here in Texas, it's a little more challenging. I don't believe that this house is very structurally sound. So I like when my ducks outside, I can hear them knocking on the wall through the wall when they're outside fiddling around. So not very structurally sound. I'm not trying to turn you into a prepper. What I'm trying to talk about is, if you would like to be prepared, how are you going to take care of those around you? How are you going to become a hero instead of a victim, or instead of a jerk? Because that's really what you become in a survival situation. If you're not ready, the inner self of you will come out. If that is a jerk who looks after for themselves only, and doesn't really hold to what they think they hold to, you will find out. I have been privileged to see the sad ends of human behavior, where even for tiny things like career, people will sacrifice what they say they believe. Don't trust. Verify. Make sure that you know who you are. Bad practice situations before you get there, right? So you know what's going to happen going in. And those are your choices, is you can be the villain, the victim, or the hero. And everyone is a little bit of everything in their lives. But in the moment of moments, you want to be the hero. You don't want to be the victim. You don't want to be the villain. You want to be the hero. And if you're just standing by, not helping in an emergency situation, you're the victim. You're not, if you're not the hero, you're one of the other two. So, planning, who you are is important, knowing your area. Okay. Always make sure somebody knows what you're planning to do and when, and keep them informed at prearranging stages so that failure to contact will set alarm bells ringing. That's someone back home. Boats and aircraft are strictly controlled in this respect, and if overdue, a search is raised and the route checked affecting rescue. Get into the habit of telling people where you're going, what time you expect to return, or reach your next destination. And this is good no matter where you are, especially in urban environments. If you are somebody who is at risk of assault, there's not a ton of evidence. Obviously, women are theoretically higher risk. Men may also be at a greater risk than what was previously reported, because males don't report. So even as a male, report where you're going. Let your buds know you're going out. Hey, I'm going to be back at this time, so that if you're not back at that time, people know what's going on. Even these are good, preparation things for even if you're going out for a night to party. A lot of my survivors, so that's when something bad happened to them, including male. So, having a plan, having somebody with you, and planning on coming home. Don't go out without a plan. Don't be like, oh, maybe I'll find someone and this will happen. Maybe someone will find you and something will happen that you don't want. So always watch your cup. Always watch your buddy's cup, male or female. Have a plan to come back and make your decisions sober. That's how you keep yourself safe, and that's how you keep your buddies safe. So if you're going to make a decision that could affect you for the rest of your life, it's better to give a number and talk in the morning than to make a mistake that night where somebody hurts you and what you thought was going to happen isn't what happens. Okay. So, being wise, I think a lot of times we don't plan ahead because we're not thinking, oh, the most horrible thing could happen. The more you plan, the less something happens to you. And unfortunately, it's the people who don't plan that something terrible happens to them, not because they deserve it, but because Murphy's Law is a jerk. And the universe is out to get you. Remember the risk benefit I talked about? Things are out to get you. your job is to protect those around you and be kind. The universe is also out to, there's a lot of good out there, but there's good because you decide for there to be good. Don't wait for good. Make good. Be the good. Watch for your buddies. Protect them. And make plans. And it doesn't have to be a big stressful thing and be like, hey, we're going to be back at this time. If we're not, sound the alarms. Roger? Okay. So we're on page 19. Being prepared for any eventuality is a tall order if you are on foot and have to carry everything you need yourself. Whatever you carry, you must ensure it is up to the job, versatile, and robust. Also, making it yourself comfortable is a big deal. I love my ruck and don't want to give it back to the military because it's got this wonderful waistband, but a piece of it broke, which makes the waistband almost, very difficult to use. And that's that's a no-no. I wouldn't want to take that into a big bad situation unless I really had to. I would want it to be working so that it's comfortable to carry a long distance. So clothing, choice of clothing is very important. This book says man is a tropical animal and can only survive naked in the tropics. The moment we leave that area, we have to provide our bodies with clothes. Maybe that's true. Historically, my understanding is that we come from the Fertile Crescent, but it was warmer, might have been tropical, who knows. So, wind and rain are the most dangerous elements in a temperate climate in the cold and extreme areas like the polar regions. Hypothermia, we're going to do a whole thing on hypothermia. That's something I've treated a lot of. In hot climates, it's very difficult to get the balance between comfort and practicality. When on the move, wear the least amount of clothing possible. Avoid walking in waterproofs if you are too hot, as the condensation generated will soak the inner layers. Clothing should give good protection and be well fitted without being restrictive. It must keep you warm and dry, but have plenty of ways to keep the body ventilated so you don't overheat. Gore-Tex is an excellent material because it's breathable and keeps you warm and dry while ventilating the body, but does have limitations. Breathable materials can only work if they are kept clean. Once they get covered in mud and accumulate grime, they are less effective. Gore-Tex is not robust or hard-wearing and must be looked after. The best way to use Gore-Tex is to walk or climb in windproof garments, and when at rest, put on the breathable kit. Synthetic materials such as fleece are very popular and in certain conditions outperform natural materials like wood, down, or cotton. Having a zipped front makes the fleece easy to put on and take off, and they're also comfortable to walk in. Choose one that is windproof, as this is often all that is needed in most conditions. If it gets colder, they can be worn under and outer waterproof, giving good insulation. There are also garments which act like an animal's skin using the buffalo system. They have a windproof outer with a man-made fiber pile inside. When wet, they perform like a wetsuit. They're good for walking in cold, wet conditions and are ideal for boating, canoeing, and caving. As for natural fabrics, wool is still an excellent choice for jumpers as it retains its warmth even when wet. The downside is it stretches and becomes heavy, so it's not a good choice for socks. Down is the warmest and lightest of all natural insulating materials, but loses all its heat-retaining qualities when wet. Cotton acts as a wick and draws up all the moisture, so it's good to wear in the tropics, but not in cold, wet regions. Footwear is an important consideration, and for serious walking, give your feet priority. Break in new boots gradually and harden up your skin with surgical spirit, starting 2 weeks before you set up. I really like moleskin, and I think if you're going to be marching any distance, you should have moleskin with you in your bag. I don't have any with me here in this studio, but I can maybe show you what it is in a little bit in a further video as we get further into feet. Basically, it's this soft material that you can use to tape it or glue it onto your feet. I knew a special forces doctor who used Dermabond underneath it, so like he actually used the surgical bond underneath it, and it basically becomes like an extra skin to protect your feet. Why are your eyes blurry, my dear? Why are you not seeing me very well? What did you do? What did I do? You see better now? Good, my magical touch, magical healing touch. So now you see better. Are you getting sleepy? We can stop here. We're still in just preparation. We've not even gotten to, beyond your survival kit. Goodness gracious. We're still in essentials for survival. I think this is going to be a lovely journey together. I'm excited. We're stopping on page 20. And you can get this book a lot of places. I don't have any affiliate links, or I would certainly take advantage of that. But you can get this book pretty much anywhere. Most of the information is going to be pretty up to date. I will try to up-to-date you with any medical information that I can, and I think we're going to have a lovely time studying together. I'm going to do a bunch of Study Buddy series, just so that we can kind of keep ourselves up to date. And we can study classical Chinese philosophy together. That's something I studied in college. That was one of my focuses. We can study acupuncture. We can study, there's a lot of things that we can study together. We can study history. I'm really excited to be starting this kind of Study Buddy series for us to really learn together, learn and relax, and make this kind of useful so that you can go on into your life not just relaxed, but actually able to better help others. I can be a bit of a controversial figure because I put my foot down, and I believe that we exist to, well, I'm not going to tell you all of my secrets, but I know why we exist. And one of the subcategories of that is that we help each other. It gets back to the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Eloheinu v'chol nafscha, I don't pronounce it correctly, v'chol levavcha, v'chol moedecha. And then the second part of it is you should love your neighbor as yourself. So, we exist. That's the reason for our existence is to love Hashem and love each other. And so if we're not doing that, I think we end up having a lot of sadness and hurt. And I'm really excited to be able to help you eliminate some of the sadness and hurt in the world. I am so tired of it, and I am often very ill myself, so I feel like I need to recruit other people to help each other and give you some of the tools to help those you care about. So if you find or feel that anything that I've said is an error, you are certainly welcome to reply in the comments. If you do so, please cite your sources so that we can actually study and get information. I think I've done a pretty good job citing my sources during this conversation, this book being a big one, other sources being my medical training or actual expert interviews I've done. We're not going to go into a lot of the deep philosophical stuff, but if you have good studies available, I'm trying to set YouTube so you can put links in the comments, because I like to see links from you guys. I like to see sources cited for this kind of conversation. And I think I'm trying to debate. I don't think that I'm going to put a bunch of extra links in this particular video because we have the book, but I usually do try to do that. If you're wondering and you wish that something would be cited, or you're wondering about a claim, put that in the comments, and I'll be glad to look into it. Or we're study buddies. We're working on this together. You can help me get better and learn too, and I appreciate that, and I'm excited about that. So take care of each other, and I hope that you rest really well today. I want to say I love you.